Great. Okay. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? So thank you everybody for joining us for the How They Did It Digital Transformation Accelerated webinar that we are doing today. We've done a number of different webinars where we've talked a lot about the digital transformation process and really how to get started and how to maintain that over time. But for this one, we wanted to do something a little bit more different. We wanted to bring a couple of guests in who have actually gone through this process and have a conversation with them about, what they did and how they actually accomplished it. So I'll go ahead and allow our guests to introduce themselves. So first we have Kathy Melgar, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hi, nice to be with you today. My name is Kathy Melgar. I am with Pacific Life. Our company is over 150 years old. Life insurance and annuity products. I'm in the annuity division, and my role is AVP of product delivery.
Great, thank you. And then Greg Zoltoon, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. I do believe you might be on mute.
All right, there we go. Sorry about that. Thanks for having me here. So yeah, my name is Greg. I'm with CeramTec North America. We are a ceramics manufacturer in South Carolina. We produce about over 15,000 different products for 3,000 different customers, ranging anywhere from medical to aerospace, military, automotive, chemical, and so on. We've got in-house design engineers, in-house tooling, lets us work with our customers and bring their designs to fruition. And I am the IT manager here, and I love working with the Appian product.
Great, thank you very much. From the Mastodon side, we have a couple of people who are joining. So we have myself, my name is Colin Schoenfelder, I'm the Director of Technology, so I'll just be kind of like emceeing and overseeing the conversation. And then also we have Lakshmi Mayapan, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself quickly. I think we have another mute.
Okay, I think we got muted by the host. All right, my name is Lakshmi, Director of Professional Services here at Mastodon. I oversee a large part of our commercial portfolio, and I was heavily involved in the projects with CeramTec, so here to fill in any gaps along with Greg.
And Martin?
Also muted, there we go. My name is Martin Mock. I am a portfolio manager at Mastodon Technologies. Been working with Appian for over 8 years and have been closely working with Kathy and Pacific Life on some of their Appian initiatives. So here to help fill in the gaps there.
Great, thank you very much. And so really the format of this, wanted to make it very discussion oriented. So I'm gonna very quickly jump out of having our presentation up and really just wanted to have it something discussing with you, Kathy and Greg, about the different journey that you have been on with digital transformation and Appian and how you've got off the ground. And so to start off with, I really wanted to talk about just the beginnings of the project. So when you were first going and entering into sort of either the digital transformation space or entering into your Appian journey and using that as kind of a platform, what was the original thing that was the need that was the impetus for it? Was it something which was a specific business need, or was it an overall objective that you had kind of from the top down, or did you hear from a number of people that they were having a lot of issues from sort of the bottom up kind of feedback? And maybe Kathy, if you wouldn't mind starting, like you just talk about the beginnings of your program.
Well, we have been with Appian for, I'm thinking it's probably pretty close to 8 years now, something like that. And we really selected it to meet a very specific need. We had a small, more, I want to say somewhat experimental annuity product line. It wasn't the primary bread and butter. And the core processing, so with annuities, you typically have like in-force processing and new business. And that core processing had been outsourced to a BPO service. But the surrounding processes had been implemented with a whole combination of tools, SharePoint, Access databases, Excel, you name it, lots of swivel chair stuff going on. And it was our architect who recognized that a product such as this should be able to solve this business need, and assisted us through the RFP process that resulted in our purchase of Appian.
Gotcha. Definitely a really common use case, when you have a number of different systems and you're trying to combine them all in one. How about Greg? How did you start getting or get started with using Appian? Was it kind of a similar thing, or did you have a different approach?
Maybe a different approach. Ours was pretty simple. So we had received the go-ahead from management to replace our current system that we've been using for probably 15 years. The current system or previous system wasn't really kept up to its latest revisions, so it was outdated. And what we were looking for, the two biggest things was number one, ease of use. We wanted something that the end users could just adapt to very quickly, very easily. And then the other thing was mobility, something that we were lacking. So we wanted people to be able to access this application from their handheld devices, iPads, laptops, being on the go without the necessity of joining into the VPN, adding that extra step and being slow.
Gotcha. And so it sounds like then, did you originally have a plan on going with Appian right off the bat, or how did you end up sort of, coming across that technology and deciding to use that one in particular?
So a lot of Google searching, as well as some recommendations from our parent organization in Germany. And so we, vetted out the competition, all the other platforms that we looked at, and Appian really seemed to be the best fit. And again, it came down to that ease of use for the end users. Also, what I didn't mention earlier is clientless. That's a big thing for me. I don't want to install clients on PCs, so I love being able to do as much as we can through the browser.
Right, right. Definitely trying to maintain all of that software and push software updates to all of those individual machines is a huge pain. And then for the actual development, right? Because it sounds like in your case, and in both cases, really, it's a big question of trying to develop your own custom software for whatever your particular solutions are. Maybe Kathy, can you talk about how much have you thought about developing in-house or having in-house IT resources develop out your solutions? Did you have that in mind at the beginning? And like, what kind of experience had you had previously as an organization in building custom
So our core products were supported predominantly with in-house development. It was kind of new to our organization to be considering something that was low code, configurable, a lot of questions about what that even meant and how reliant we'd be on the vendor and how much of a risk would be associated with that if you don't actually have the source code yourself and things like that. So we were actually coming from a point of not being as familiar with this type of software, and I would say a little bit more suspicion around the risks associated with it.
Gotcha. And so then in that case, were you looking at first then when you decided to go, I mean, it sounds like that's a pretty big leap of faith, right? To go forth and, try to do something which was going to be a custom build. Did you have things which you were looking for in a particular partner, or how did you do your your search for who was actually going to be helping you through that process of using the solution and actually building things out?
So remembering that this is a product that wasn't front and center, we didn't have a big team that could come to it. So we actually, that was one of the criteria in selecting Appian, was we don't want something where you need 60 people to be running it. And we really wanted to be able to manage it mostly ourselves with a small number of people. And so that is actually how we started off. We had Appian come in and do some training. Then we had them work with us. I think it was maybe 3 weeks or so full time. And then after that, we just went into a cadence that was more like checking in, and the people internal were doing the development. So that's how we started off. And then as our needs grew, that's when we really started reaching out to some vendor partners to work with. Do you want me to elaborate on a little bit of that vendor partner evolution?
I guess I'm curious about making that transition from doing things completely internally into using a partner. Like, at what time did you realize that that was something that you needed to do, and what were the gaps that you realized that you needed to fill as you were kind of going through that process?
So I would say there's really two stages. The first one was we were bringing on a vendor partner just to have additional hands, basically. So we weren't necessarily looking for additional guidance. We were mostly looking for more people on the team. And we were working with an offshore firm at that point. And then as we started to expand out to additional applications, so I talked about that starting small. So we had that application that went on, and then we started building more and more applications on it. And as we built more applications, we recognized that we really needed to have a partner who could stay very connected in with what Appian's direction is, what the best practices are in a changing world. When we came in, the product was going through a lot of evolution. Sale was just being introduced, things like that, right? So there were a lot of changes that were occurring, and we really needed somebody who could stay current with it so that our people could continue to focus on the business process that we were trying to get onto the platform and didn't have to be constantly staying on top of the changing platform. So that's really the point at which we engaged with Mastodon. We went to Appian and said, we're ready for a different type of partner. Can you help us identify? They gave us kind of the short list of people to start talking to, and Mastodon was on that short list, and we found, you know, the connection, the partnership to be really strong.
Great, yeah. And Greg, it sounds like you had a bit of a different experience, because it sounds like you had a lot more experience developing software in-house. So can you talk a little bit about, you know, when you started using the Appian platform, and how did your, you know, internal developers start working with it, and then how did you sort of move through that process into looking for a partner and the kind of gaps that you were, you know, hoping to fill with a partner?
Yeah, actually, so our story is very similar to Kathy's, except it's the opposite. We got engaged and we needed that partner support right up front, because we had a very short amount of time to deploy Appian and get it off the ground. In fact, we did it in less than 12 months, completely replaced the existing system, you know, with, I mean, can I say 100% success? So it was certainly an achievement. We could not have done it internally, you know, learning the software, building the applications and deploying it. So again, ours was opposite of Kathy's. We had to get that partner support up front. During that time, we were able to do some training with Appian and develop our in-house team now, which is a one-man developing team. It's not me, it's somebody else. And then, you know, I myself, I didn't have experience developing software prior to Appian. The individual that took care of our old platform was actually nearing retirement. So everything kind of fell at one time, and that kind of helped, you know, steer us into an application like Appian as well. It was, you know, now's the time for change, and we got to change, you know, everything, our developers and everything. So it all happened at once.
Gotcha. One thing that you mentioned in both cases, it sounds like, you know, Greg, in your case, you had a very concrete number of, you know, systems that you were trying to replace. Kathy, in your case, it sounds like you started with something small and then, you know, built out into the different applications that you were, you know, building out in Appian one at a time. Can you talk about how did that process go? How did you try and figure out exactly what the next most, you know, prioritized workflows or processes that you wanted to try and build were? And, you know, how was that something that you decided internally? Was that something that you built based on, you know, feedback from users? How exactly did that process go, Kathy, if you could start?
So even though I characterize this as a product that was less recognized within the organization, our implementation actually had a lot of similarities to what Greg just talked about, where there were some applications that we needed to get rid of, right? So we didn't want to just have something gluing together all of these disparate systems. What we wanted to do was actually, in many cases, bring them in. So there was a big monolithic application that had been built in VB or something like that, that we had to pull off of and you know, get rid of the SharePoint, get rid of the Access database, pulling all these things in. And that initial project was also, I think, about 12 months to really get everything, simplify it, get the other applications out of the way, stop having to have this comparison between, is this system saying the same thing as that system, et cetera. So we really went forward with that, and that was our predominant application with really strong user input at the beginning, developing the user stories with us and everything like that. And then after we had that success associated with it, and they felt very much a part of that development and owning it and understanding how it was built and everything, then it started to kind of slowly go out beyond that. They're like, oh, here's another problem that we want to solve, another business process on a related line. So we had another annuity product that needed to have a process that started all the way in sales, went through with operations and finance and product pricing, et cetera. So it flowed across, and that was kind of an interesting endeavor too, to get all these different teams on the same page to think about it and really to evaluate whether the processes they were performed actually belonged with them or belonged somewhere else. And so then we did that one. And then I think the next big step for us was when our finance team started to recognize the value of that. And that's really taken off. They really see this as core to kind of everything that they're doing now.
Gotcha. And actually, I have a follow-up question about that. When you were going through and you were trying to figure out these new workflows and the new groups that you were trying to bring into that, how did you go about trying to, gather requirements and try and figure out exactly what those processes were going to be like? Because it sounds like in a lot of cases they were new, right? Like these weren't things that you were necessarily recreating from old processes. They were completely new things that you were endeavoring into. So did you have like business process, just experience or experts, or how did that work?
Yeah, thank you for for taking my mind back to some of that. There were some really really interesting firsts that we were going through. So this was actually the first use of Agile. But it was also our mindset up, and like I said, one of the firsts for an application that we didn't have the source code for. But one of the mindset shifts also was our technology department was very, very focused primarily on transaction processing. And so this concept of becoming an integral part of the business processes and reliant on things that technology was providing in order to do their business processes was actually something that our technology leadership was not 100% fond of to start with. I think that's maybe why some of these start off in the business area. So they had a little bit of a struggle with that. Am I going to be the one who gets the call in the middle of the night because this thing didn't work, and it doesn't have to do with core transaction processing, it has to do with business processes.
Right.
But I had the benefit of having an analyst on my team who was just outstanding and really had a strong ability to navigate through the organization and help the areas understand why the process might benefit from a change. He's now our process architect in the digital transformation automation team. So this was kind of, I was lucky to have him in that early stage. And then now we're using Mastodon's business process architect for those types of processes.
That's great. And then Greg, when you were kind of going through, it sounds like, you had that concrete list of things that you very much needed to, replace over time. But did you still, through that, have the process of, okay, well, which one is the first one that we're going to go through, and then kind of like, iterating through that process of migrating all of those applications? Can you talk a little bit how you decided, which things were first and how you kind of grew upon that?
Yeah, so it was easy to identify which one was first, and that's because it's our, it's our business, it's our quoting system. So we have we had a home-built application to, workflow to work through our quoting, and that went from, the sales team to the customer service team to the engineering team to the finance team. Everybody has to have their input. Because a lot of the parts we build are custom. So it's not like we're making a widget that we made last month. No, this is a brand new widget, and it's going to take more labor. It's going to take different materials, different suppliers, and it's a very big process. We as an organization were able to really streamline our quoting process down to like a 2 to 3 day turnaround. And it's funny, it's all based off of an Excel spreadsheet. So
most classic businesses are.
that's right. Although a lot of companies may be looking at Appian to replace that Excel spreadsheet, we had no desire to replace the Excel spreadsheet, but what we needed was something that could hand that Excel spreadsheet off from person to person, because that sheet, we're able to just modify things so quickly and get the calculations. They don't need IT to go in there and do it like in the Appian system. The engineers can make the tweak in the Excel sheet. So it's those tweaks have to be done at the user level. Hence the reason for keeping the Excel spreadsheet. But quoting system had to be number one, had to be the first one off the ground, basically because our business depended on that one. Also, it was the biggest one, so we wanted to take off the biggest bite we could up front, get that done, get it out of the way, and if we were not able to complete the remaining applications, they could trickle over into the following year. But as I stated earlier, we were able to pretty much get everything done within that short amount of time.
Gotcha. I'm curious, so you mentioned that you were able to take, the process lifetime down, to only a couple of days from, its previous, you said a couple of weeks that it would take. As you were going through and developing out these processes within Appian, did you find that you were, reflecting upon how you were operating and then making efficiencies and changing the way that you were building them since you had that opportunity, or were you trying to really just centralize everything in that process inherently? I guess, it simplified things. Like, how much process re-engineering did you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So although we didn't have time to play with, it was the opportune time to analyze those processes, analyze all those steps. Do we need this? Do we need that? How can we streamline it even better? And that was the end result. So, using the system of analyzing, basically collecting user stories, what does the end user need? What do they do? And then taking it to the next level, digging down a little bit deeper into those processes, you start to discover there are steps that, really aren't necessary. So change, you gotta, implement some change. And again, it was the best time to do it while you're building a new platform. There's no sense bringing all that old stuff over into a new system.
Yeah, you mentioned user stories. Kathy, you said that this was, or at least a little while ago, was the first time that you had gone in and used Agile before. I'm curious, Greg, was this the first time that you had used Agile before in your organization, or is that something that you were relatively familiar with from other, development?
No, that was the first time, and it, it took a little bit to get used to because it was a big change, but it was very beneficial.
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely. Embracing that iterative approach, I think, at least in our experience, has always, yielded a lot better results. And so I'm curious, kind of like moving on a little bit. So as you were going through and starting the projects and working with these sort of digital transformation Appian, like these central platforms, Kathy, could you tell a little bit about, did you have any initial things that you were going into it, any initial expectations that you found were very different when you were actually starting to use the platform and kind of going through that process? Or what kinds of things were you not expecting as you were going through that change?
Well, I think one of the really fascinating ones comes from the user perspective. They were used to very bespoke systems developed for them on a client server model. And so when we took on, and I'm gonna forget what version we were going to, when we saw the demo with Appian, we saw a different version than we were actually taking. They were in the process of a complete rewrite. And so their complete rewrite wasn't yet as robust. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I had seen the demos, and then I was coming back to the demos, and I was like, whoa, wait a second, I thought we were able to do this. And that's when I started to kind of click in that they were building some of this functionality in the new platform just a little ahead of us. But one of the things that came up with the users is they'd be looking at the screen and they're like, I need this error to stand out. I want it in red. Well, I'm sorry, you can't have it in red, right? And so there were a lot of those types of things where they started to try to tailor their thought to, there's a different way to approach something when it's not fully bespoke. And we had some education to do on why that was actually beneficial to them long term, right? So they had to understand why that was better than having a system that was completely from scratch, developed exactly how they wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say that was probably one of the big aha moments for us as an organization in how to use a system of this nature.
Yeah, and I think I remember the days of not being like the specific thing of not being able to have something highlighted in red, definitely being a pain point. Immediately before this webinar, there was actually another Appian release presentation, and they continue to enhance and constantly deliver new updates that you get to take advantage of. And so as soon as I think in 2 weeks or something like that, when the next version is released, suddenly you get access to a lot of different things that we want to do, and it continues to enhance over time. So yeah, it's definitely nice to have that to continue to get those features. Greg, how about you? Were there things that you were surprised by as you started working with platforms like this and started to go through that process? Was there anything in particular that expectations that you had that were upended as you started that process?
No, I don't think anything was upended. It was funny in the beginning when I first reached out to Appian. Like one of the very first questions that I had was, can you handle, handing off an Excel spreadsheet? And it's not just a spreadsheet; it's a workbook, and it's not just handing it off. The system needs to read the data that's in the Excel sheet and actually add data to the Excel sheet. So I said, the application has to work with the Excel spreadsheet. And really too, that also helped make Appian one of the choices, because a lot of the applications out there were like, no, we can't interact with the XLS spreadsheet. So it's like, okay, next, I don't need to talk to you anymore. But it's funny, Kathy mentioned the thing about, you can't have this text highlight in red. So we were fortunate enough to come in later in the picture, and we got all those nice little bonuses. So there was nothing unexpected or like upended in a negative way, but we did get some little positive surprises, because I think having something like turning a little X, a red X or a green check mark, were some of the things that were recent additions to Appian. And those little cues, although very subtle, can make a big impact on making it easy for the end user. And again, that was one of our big drivers, was we wanted something that was easy to adapt to, easy to use, and also, pleasant on the eyes. So that's what Appian does.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned earlier about the mobile experience as well being very important. And the nice thing about having a mobile experience which looks very similar to the browser experience, and it's easy to go back and forth between the two and understand those commonalities, I think is also another big advantage. Yeah. But I'm curious, so Greg, also you mentioned that you have very strict timelines, right? Like we need to go through and actually deliver all of these systems in a year. Was there anything in particular that you did, either from the process or the technology that you were doing that really helped to accelerate that process of going through and delivering all of those things on time?
Yeah, I think two things that come to mind. One, the agile process, digging in, looking at those processes, exploring them, basically dissecting them and rebuilding them in a more efficient way. And then, using the MVP concept. At the end of the day, if you don't focus on, when you're on a time crunch like we were, if you don't focus on this is the absolute necessities of this application, these things have to work. We take the things that really don't impact the end result, we set them off to the side. And I think that was a big help, in addition to the ability to import all of our historical data.
Mm-hmm.
If we weren't able to import the historical data, we could have potentially ended up with two systems, which would have been a nightmare, because once people migrated to the new system, they would still be referencing the old system in order to, populate or key in information. And we would have lost all of our efficiencies. We simply would have had a mobile ready platform, but slowing us down.
Gotcha.
So the ability to bring in that data was a big factor, I think.
Gotcha. And then Kathy, kind of same question. As you were going through, was there anything in particular that you noticed about how to deliver things very quickly and how to kind of have fast change moving through that you noticed as you were going through, or anything that sort of you embraced as you were going through when you were trying to deliver things quickly?
Well, I think just the nature of the application allows for that agile kind of approach. And that was, like I said, it was new to us, understanding who was going to be the owner of it. I like the fact that using agile, you can really drive business ownership so that they can think about it, but you do need to have a guide. You need to have somebody who understands how to help them think about it. And so there were some interesting things as we were doing that. One of them is around MVP. So a lot of times when people are pushed into MVP, it starts to sound to them like the previous projects where everything that wasn't in phase one never got done. And so you really have to reorganize that thought process, right? That no, we're going to be here to work with you. We understand the fact that when you're doing an automation of a process, you may not be able to identify everything that is important to you. You may not identify it until it's been in place for a little bit. And so if you don't have the resources available to help them through that, then they're going to be very concerned about getting it right up front. The other thing that this architecture approach allowed us to do was to take the burden off of our business user to figure it all out up front. And so I remember a very distinct call with our product owner at the very beginning where he said, I don't know how to think about what's going to be needed in sprint 4, 5, or 6. I only know how to think about what's in sprint 1 or 2. And I said, that's okay, because that's exactly how you're supposed to think. If we get to sprint 5 or 6 and we discover you put in place something that doesn't work, we'll change it. And he was just stunned that he didn't have to really figure out all the requirements from beginning to end. And of course, it helps if you can do some architecture up front and have that perspective. But it's comforting for people to know that it can be. It's not the, oh, we're going to have to throw everything out and start all over because you missed something, right? So I think that was a big part of the pattern of operation that was very beneficial.
Right. And I think that, embracing that agile process, identifying the goals that you have, right? Like, here are my actual, mile markers that I am trying to, go after. And the things that I am really trying to identify as the outcomes that I am looking for. And then, the particulars of how it's executed aren't necessarily going to be, set in stone. You're going to be able to change, and you're going to be able to, flex around until you, reach that. I'm curious, after you started to embrace, kind of like that agile methodology and just, using things like this, has your just overall approach to just like project management at, organization or changed at all, or in the way that you run projects yourself?
Well, I would say that it's still somewhat tied to the type of application that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So our company, just about, I'm thinking it's about 2 years ago, we kicked off an official digital transformation project, and we started really selecting the types of tools that could help us with that more agile approach. And so we've got some really big major undertakings right now that are following much more of we're not following like SAFe or a specific design like that, but we have about quarterly program increment planning. We have the regular scrums, and this is one of our central systems now. And so all of the other systems are starting to try to figure out how to align to it. And it's been kind of fun because I constantly refer back to, hey guys, if you want to know how it's done, you just take a look at this same agile team that's been in place for 8 years, and how they have examined and refined and what they've chosen to stick with, and get some benefit from learning about this. So I think where we still have systems that are very architected around that waterfall design, we have a little bit of a clash, and so there's always a need to kind of bring the two worlds together.
Right, for sure. And a lot of the times when we are entering in organizations and starting to work with them, even if they're not calling it like a waterfall design, just that exact same anxiety that you describe about I really need to have everything planned out to the nth degree before I start the process is something that we, are trying to coach through a lot. And that's something that we experience at every single organization that we go into. And when you're new to the agile methodology, that can be definitely something which is a big shift in the mindset. And Greg, I'm curious, likewise, this was your first, foray into agile. Has that been something which has been change the way that you approach the problem or different solution development as you're going forward, in IT as you're moving out into different systems, or in just project management generally as you're, talking about like an organization?
Yeah, so we have tried to adapt as much of that methodology as we can and apply it to our day-to-day activities, although it seems more fitting for a very large project, and most of our projects lately have been very small. But we can still use that way of thinking to make our way through these projects. For make sure we don't miss something, and again, make sure we're reviewing everything thoroughly, having that ability to take out things that are unnecessary. One of the applications that we had in our previous platform, but rebuilt it in Appian, is called a program change request application, where an end user can submit a change that they want made, whether it's to the Appian platform itself or it's to other applications within our business. It goes to their manager. The manager reviews it to see if it's something that we should put time into, and they approve it or reject it. And then it comes to me, and then I do the same thing. Basically, is this going to take a lot of money, or do we have the in-house resources? And that's really the starting steps of that process. Is we're going to go through this, have everybody that needs to approve it. Once it goes into development, then we start digging into it, trying to use the agile methodology.
Right. Definitely those like approval processes and projects and things like that is definitely a big part of, just trying to make sure that everything is, going ahead smoothly, and keeping everybody on the same page about where all of these different initiatives are is a really huge thing. And so kind of switching topics a little bit, we've been talking a lot about the beginning of the project, and then, as you are going through and developing things out. Kathy, you talked a lot about, getting end user feedback and incorporating that back into your process. Can you talk a little bit about how that change management and communication went with the end users, and like how you went about communicating with them about the new systems that they had coming out?
Well, I think the key to it is the business user involvement. I don't. We were kind of going against a tradition here, where the business would just give a broad outline of what they wanted, and then we would go away and miraculously deliver it. And I think when you do that, then there's less understanding about what it really means, right? And so this approach has really involved the users so much more extensively. And I know I touched briefly on our use in finance, but that has become a real model for us. So we have an agreement with Mastodon that is what we refer to as Core plus Flex. So we basically have our core services, a couple of resources that are constantly there and available. And then the Flex model says, and if you have something else that is worth doing and you have the budget associated with it, there's an option here. And the way you can do that is by sponsoring it, working directly with the architect, working directly with Macedon and being able to deliver what you need to through a combination of use of Macedon along with own internal resources. And the ownership, the buy-in, the change management, everything associated with that just starts to fall into place when you have that that kind of setup.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Getting that like constant user feedback and making sure that they know what's coming ahead of time is so huge. And Greg, how about in your case, you know, you're talking about using a ton of different applications and you're migrating over to new ones. How did that communication and rollout to the user, to the end users go? Was that something which was very stressful to the end users? Was it something that people were embracing of?
It may have been stressful to them at first because all of a sudden they're being involved, they're being asked questions, they're being tasked, you know, they got things to do. Maybe they don't want to, you know, this is an IT thing, why are you bugging me? But like Kathy said, you know, it would be handed to you, you go work on it, magically deliver this thing, but it's a big mystery box now, right? So this definitely does provide those users with the opportunity not only to give input, but to also see how it's progressing. And at the same time, they can talk to their colleagues and kind of start spreading the word. You know, so it definitely helps trickle the information through the organization at a nice, slow pace where everyone can absorb it, rather than just coming out next Monday and dumping this application and nobody knows a thing. Yeah, so yeah, involving those users like that is a very good process.
Right.
I may elaborate on that just a little bit. The tables were turned on me a little bit where we were always doing this for our business partners, but we're actually automating something right now that improves the life of somebody who reports to me. And so I got the opportunity of seeing how to engage this group in the development of it and the understanding of it, the mission of it, and the value of it, and participate in it right from the beginning so that they don't feel threatened by the automation that is occurring. And I think that's a really important part of it too, if in managing expectations, if people think this is going to be a loss of job, a loss of identity, a loss of doing something that they love.
Gotcha. And for the final question that I wanted to ask and to talk about, I was really kind of curious about, you know, what you are thinking about doing and sort of the next steps. Like, are there other projects that you're considering to try and roll this out to? Is this something like in Greg, in your case, you know, you got through the initial list of applications. Has that opened up your eyes or changed the way that you were thinking about, you know, how you would treat applications going forward? Kathy, if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, we're actually in a moment of pretty big expansion. We were doing this within our own division, and a part of the process got moved out, the new division formed, and so we started supporting a second division. And then our digital transformation team started operating very independently. We asked Macedon to be kind of the lead vendor, and then they can go get other services as they need, and then Macedon coordinates that all to make sure that we're all aligned on a single instance. So that was great. It was all within our division, and now we're just having conversations with another division that wants to go big with Appian, and so we started small and we're just like building now onto that. So that's where I think the next frontier is for us.
Okay, great. And Greg, how about you?
Yeah, and for us, we've got a lot of ideas, and some of them, basically, I throw it back to the end user and I say, hey, if you got an idea, submit that PCR. Your manager is going to review it. You know, let it work its way up the chain the way it's supposed to naturally. You know, I'm not going to put it out there and just say, okay, we're going to do this for you because now I'm going around the process. But yeah, we have some ideas that are simmering out there. We did implement one new application that replaced a very convoluted paper process. It was almost unbelievable we were still doing it that way, but somebody would fill out a paper form, and I think that piece of paper traded hands and got walked around the building 8 different times. You know, not only 8 times, but back and forth too. Getting logged here, getting logged there. There's no telling how many Excel spreadsheets this data was punched into. So we took on the task of building that application, and it was a great outcome because it was very well received. In the beginning, some of the, the managers were thinking, people aren't going to do this. This isn't going to work. They want to see that piece of paper hanging in the hallway. They can fill it out. And really, this application itself has been a huge success. Again, very well received. And it's hard to speak to the amount of efficiency that has been put in place with this one. And I think, several weeks or a month after it was put out there, I reached out to one of the managers and I said, hey, what's your gut feeling? What's your response about this system? And they said, it's absolutely wonderful. That was his response. So there's opportunities, to continue building additional applications, trying to find those efficiencies or those old processes and bring them into something new.
Greg, I love that story. One of ours was motivated by something very similar. It was a paper application that had to flow around the building, and then it needed to be audited.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a thing. If I can add to that, so that process that we had to report on it. At the end of the month, it had to be reported on, it had to be sent to our parent organization, and now it's all automated. They can go out, we basically have a KPI report, they can pull that information and it's there. So it's made a lot of people happy.
Absolutely. All right, well, getting to the end of the discussion topics that I kind of wanted to go through, I'll go ahead and share my screen and just open it up to any questions from the audience that we have. It was interesting as you were going through there, as we're waiting for anybody to come through, the idea of getting a lot of feedback from users and incorporating that into the process. At Mastodon, like we've talked about this before on other webinars, but Mastodon, we very much use Appian internally, and I think one of the key features, which everybody has a good time, is we have submit feedback about our apps, but people submit feedback about things a lot more broadly than just like the technology as they're going through. And those go immediately to my inbox so that I can filter through them. And definitely, a lot of the different really huge efficiencies that we have put into our process, because we're big on systemizing our own delivery. So, all of the improvements that we have to our delivery cycle and making sure that challenges are effectively communicated and making sure that, testing checklists and things like that are going through, all come through that forum. And it's great the amount of organizational change that you can get from not only just sort of, the top-down initiatives that you're coming through and, getting from an organization, but also just getting feedback about things which are big pain points in everybody's experience going through and doing the job. So it's very huge. But let's see. So with regard to questions, I don't see anything that's queued up there right now.
I've got a few. I can start us with a couple of questions while we're waiting. Hopefully get an audience question. But mine for both of you is, if you could go back, and tell your past self, 12, 24, 36 months ago, advice on this, especially this accelerated, program that you need to build within a year, less than 12 months. What advice would you give yourself?
Kathy, how about you start?
That's a really good question. I don't know. What advice would I give myself? I guess one of the fascinating things with automating business processes is the different nature of it over normal kind of transaction processes, and how the discovery can occur. And so the recent project that we're on is we had a specific thing we wanted to do, but then as we started to sort of go a little bit further into, okay, so what do you do? Well, I post this out to SharePoint. Well, what do the people who come to SharePoint do with it? How do they respond to it? What do they, and you start to follow it through. And, you could say that is this scope creep? Oh, that's horrible. Or is it, do we have to be fearful of shadow ITs or whatever? But what it really does is it gives you an opportunity to sort of lean into some of those things and say, it's okay to discover more opportunity. it's okay when people then start realizing, wow, this is a tool that could be used for these other things as well. And so I think maybe just recognizing the opportunities it opens up instead of trying to manage it in the style that you managed traditional development.
Yeah, absolutely. And Greg, how about you? Any advice to your former self?
Really, it's like just get it started. I was lucky. If the order had not came from management, we would still be using the old platform today. And basically, it was because I couldn't drive that change. That change had to come from those guys. And it really has been. It's a big change. A lot of people are afraid of change, but it's made so many positive results. So I think I would tell myself, maybe if the upper guys aren't listening, maybe I need to start screaming a little bit louder, that we need a different application. And because you're stuck with using the same old thing that doesn't really adapt 100% to your business, to your needs.
Mm-hmm.
And we got lucky with Appian because it's very customizable to fit very close with the business needs. We're not stuck in a platform that just locks you down.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Lakshmi, did you say that you had another question that you had thought of, or?
Yeah. So I think it's, and I'm generalizing, but I think a lot of our attendees probably have thought to themselves, okay, I need to start this project. Oh man, it's got to be fast. The industry's changing. We got to keep up. And do some Google searching, and you find words like, okay, we got a digital transformation. Oh, Agile is going to help a lot with that. And it's a lot of the things that maybe we even talked about, but those alone, just implementing Agile doesn't automatically fix all your problems. It does not create a successful project. So I guess how do I turn that back into a question? What did you do to make sure that your end result actually met your vision and goals, to make sure that it was what your users needed to use, especially on an accelerated timeline where you don't have time for, to go through hundreds of iterations?
How about Kathy, if you want to start again?
Well, I think that the part of Agile to embrace is the learning. And, a lot of people think, oh yeah, Agile is going to solve it. Let me implement all those ceremonies. But the most important thing is being able to learn as you go. Experiment, learn about the process and how it can be most effective, but also learn about how to work. I mentioned our team being around for about 8 years, and there's a number of times where they heard about some new concept. Oh, maybe instead of Scrum, we want to use the Kanban. Maybe we should stop using story points. Maybe we should do this. How about 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks, or whatever? And every time we encourage them to go look into it, think about it, decide it, reform it, shape it as you want to, right? And their ability to do that and allow it to shape with them is really powerful. And it's kind of funny because they changed very little along the way, but actually knowing that they could, taking the time to evaluate it and decide that, actually we like the 2-week cadence, let's stick with it. That type of thing has been really powerful because it helped them to feel that they owned this.
Yeah, absolutely. And how about you, Greg?
I think I forgot the question, but speaking on like story points and that brought back some memories that using that methodology, you really can shift things around, reprioritize. Maybe you decided something wasn't necessary, but you just moved it off to the side. So later down the road, it comes back up. You just drag it back over into your, like your sprint, what you're working on. So the ability to adapt while you're still moving forward, is good.
Great. Well, we're coming up on the top of the hour, so I did just wanted to let everybody know, thank you very much for attending. Kathy and Greg, thank you very much. I think that this was a really helpful conversation. We really have, you know, a lot of experiences where we're going through and sorry, I've lost my webcam, so I'm not actually sure if I'm still on there, but we've had a lot of experiences where we go through and we have situations that are very akin to what we have seen in your two experiences. We have a lot of other things that we have, you know, done in forms of webinars and talking about the digital transformation process, which really echoes a lot of the things that we're talking about here, and a lot of different solutions that we have that can even get you started from the ground up a lot further ahead. So go ahead and take a look at all of the different other content that we have available, which sort of expands on the strategies on how we accomplish the things that we've talked about today. But again, thank you very much, Kathy and Greg. Really appreciated you coming on. I thought it was a great conversation, and congratulations on your success with your platforms. And thank you very much, everybody, for attending.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.